Alright, I had it working, but apparently, oh, there we go. Aha. Alright, give me just 1 second. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this. Let me just pull it up over here. So, today was the supposed deadline for the 10% credit card cap for interest rates. Um, I don't think nothing came of it, even though it wasn't implemented. It was just proposed. I think today was like the deadline for credit card companies to actually comply with the 10% cap. But this video, or this interview with, ooh, I forgot his name. Give me 1 second. Kevin Hassett. He basically goes over the entire affordability agenda of Trump and his administration. He just gives like a quick rundown of everything they're doing, of what they believe is in the best interest of us, of the American citizen. So we're just gonna watch this video and react to what his thoughts are. And we shall start right now. Trump economist expects biggest refund season ever. Sounds
Welcome
amazing.
back. President Trump rolling out his 2026 affordability agenda aimed at driving costs down for American households. The president targeting lower rates, focusing on mortgage rates and credit card rates. He's calling for a one-year 10% cap on credit card interest rates beginning January 20th. He's also ordering Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds to push mortgage rates lower. The president signaling support for the American homebuyer with a new order restricting large investors from buying single-family homes. Joining me now is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, great to have you this morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Maria.
Well, this is a whole bunch of efforts on the part of the president and your team to try to lower costs. Let's go through some of them. The ban on large institutional investors purchasing single-family homes. How much of an impact has that had on the supply of homes, Kevin?
Right. Well, nationwide, it depends on what you think a large institutional investor is. That there are some definitions that it's people who own more than 100 homes, some definitions that it's people who own more than 1,000 homes. But if you go to the 100-home definition, then you're looking at, in some places, up to 20% of the market is owned by institutions. Now, the institutions have a tax advantage over ordinary home buyers in the sense that they get to write off the depreciation on the home as they're holding it and renting it. And so it basically makes like the tax rules put people out of the running when they want to compete with an institutional investor. And it's something that President Trump just doesn't think is right. And I think that what we're likely to see is an executive order that describes what an institutional investor is, what a single family home is. And then when that comes out, there'll be a clear guidance to people about when they can feel free that they're playing on a level playing field when they're competing for a home.
Kevin.
Now, apologies for the crackling in the background. I believe that's from the interviewer on Fox News, like going through pages. I don't know how to stop that. But I love this. This is an issue that has long to be addressed. I know for myself, my next goal in life is to buy a home. However, I have to have a lot more funds available to be able to put a down payment because of the competition against these institutional investors who are coming in with loads of money, loads of cash, and housing affordability has become a major issue in this country. And to know that now, as Kevin just said here, we're on a level playing field, or we're about to be. So it does give me hope for, buying my first home in the near future, and I hope it gives hope to the rest of you as well if you're looking to do that.
This 10% cap on credit card interest rates obviously has the banks talking, and a lot of them are very worried about this. This new potential card cap could wipe out the earnings from the card portfolios for a year. Those are the expectations there. If applied to all cards, analysts say it would hurt large bank pre-tax earnings by between 5 and 18%. And wipe out earnings for the monolines like a Cap One Financial. Your thoughts on the president putting this in place? Obviously, Congress would have to codify this for law. Will these banks be forced to follow this?
Well, I think we've been in conversations with the big banks, with CEOs of many of the big banks, who think that the president's onto something, that he's got a great idea that they could potentially voluntarily provide for people who are in that sort of sweet spot of not having financial leverage very much because they don't have access to credit, but they have enough income and stability in their lives so that they're worthy of credit. And so our expectation is that it won't necessarily require legislation because there'll be really great new trump cards presented for folks that are voluntarily provided by the banks.
And
Sorry, I have my mic off. She mentioned earnings, how this would affect their earnings. For me, it's more like earnings versus market sentiment. Because right now, there's a lot of people struggling to pay bills, unsure how they're going to put food on the table. These institutions have preyed on us for years. And I'm sure they could absorb these cuts with all the profit that they've made off of us. So when I hear like, oh, this could affect their earnings, come on now. They definitely have a big pile of cash that they could burn through for sure.
And then there's a significant move on mortgage-backed securities with the president calling for $200 billion in purchases. Not technically quantitative easing, but the GSEs are the buyers and not the central bank. Talk to us about this. How significant a move would you expect in mortgage rates as a result of this move from the president?
Well, this is a move that was very much supported by Secretary Bessent and Bill Pulte, who runs Fannie and Freddie. And the basic idea is that if you get the spread down on the interest rate for mortgages, then you help people get cheaper mortgages. And we've seen a pretty big reaction to the announcement, and I think that actually makes us all feel better, because the truth is that fewer people are buying homes right now than we've seen pretty much in my lifetime. And the reason is that we had runaway Biden inflation, and then the Fed lifted interest rates so much that mortgage rates went through the roof, and the typical monthly payment about doubled for an ordinary family buying an ordinary home, and the down payment they needed to buy a home went from about $15,000 to about $32,000. And so there's a real lot of room to make up.
Wild.
And we've got a whole bunch of policies that are going to help
Almost
people do that.
doubled to
the one
put
you
a down
didn't
payment.
mention that we're also talking about, and the president will put the final plan out in Davos next week. I'll be flying up there with him. Is that we're going to allow people to take money out of their 401ks and use that for down payment.
Oh, well, that's interesting, to take money out of your 401k.
Now, regarding the housing, you probably already know this, but just to put some numbers in case you don't know what they are. The percentage of first-time home buyers accounted for a record low of 21% in 2025 of home purchases. And this is according to the National Association of Realtors, NAR. The year before that, it was 24%. The year before that, it was 32%. The year before that, it was 26%. So you saw sort of a bit of an increase from 2022 to 2023. But still, in the early years in 2000s, obviously before the housing crash, we were hovering around 40%. So you still notice a decline in first-time home buyers. Fewer people are buying homes each and every year. So what are we gonna do about it? Well, we gotta see how this agenda goes. And well, I'll leave my thoughts
Do you
after
worry
he
that
speaks
taking
on
money out
this.
of the 401k is going to hurt people on the other side for retirement?
Well, what you have to do is come up with a way. So a simple way. We're still talking about the mechanics of it, but suppose that you put 10% down on a home, and then you take 10% of the equity of the home and put it in as an asset in your 401k. Then your 401k will grow over time as the value of your house grows. You'll be healthy, have more money for retirement, and you'll have solved the liquidity constraint problem and gotten yourself a house early in life.
Wow, that is
Now, this sounds nice. It really does. I just don't know how smart it would be because I have a 401k. I hope you guys do as well. But you tapping into your 401k means less compound growth, which is the biggest driver of retirement wealth. And if your home value just starts to decline like they did during the housing crash in 2008, then you lose on both fronts. So you're screwed either way. Now, if you're banking that you might not reach retirement age, then shoot, this might actually be, you know, a good idea. But if you're somewhat active and healthy and maybe cautious with your surroundings, you'll probably need all you can get from your 401k because you'll probably make it to that retirement age. So, unless you're wanting to take that risk, I think twice before pulling out of your 401k. But then again, it's a much better idea than throwing all your 401k on red or black. But who knows?
That's an interesting move. We'll be waiting for the president to give us more details next week. Kevin, there's a lot of things that the president has announced as a result of this affordability push. And I want to get your take on the impact. What kind of economic growth would you expect in the first half of the year? We've been talking a lot about the idea of 5% GDP. Where are you at?
Yeah, I think that right now, if we look at productivity, it's running at about 4%. And then usually capital and labor add another couple of percent to growth in a typical year. So if we really keep that 4% productivity, we're looking at one of the best years we've ever seen. And so I have a hard time seeing growth below 4%. And I think we could see some blowout year growth numbers, annual growth numbers that are things that we haven't seen before. Because like, look at it this way. In the fourth quarter, we have GDP now saying that it's about 5%, a little bit more. But that's with a 1.5% penalty from the government shutdown. So if there hadn't been a shutdown, then GDP now would be telling us about 6.5%. I mean, those are numbers, Maria, that you and I have rarely seen in our lifetimes.
Wow. The analyst community.
So I think part of her bringing this up is because bank executives have actually been speaking out publicly, and you can actually look this up online, but they've been saying that this cap on credit cards means less available credit, which means reduce consumer spending, in turn, slow GDP growth. Though that could be the case, I personally I don't think we should bank on people going into debt to raise consumer spending. There's job security, there's the wealth effect, there's tax cuts, etc. If your money is going towards paying off these high interest rates on these credit cards, you best believe I'll be cooking all my meals at home instead of ordering takeout or cutting back on traveling till I've saved enough money to buy a flight or, you know, stop shopping for new clothes and just, you know, go with my current wardrobe for the next 2 or 3 years. Just a few things to consider.
Community on Wall Street is also talking about a windfall over taxes once we get through April 15th. Households will likely spend at least 70% of their nearly $200 billion 2026 tax windfall, according to Jake Ubina over at Piper Sandler. What kind of a tax windfall would you expect this tax season?
Right, I think that number is about right. Yeah, I think that's about the right number. I mean, the fact is that the no tax on PIPs, the no tax on overtime, all of that happened mid-year, and so the IRS didn't really have time to change the tax forms. And so the folks that are in that spot, and also the reduced tax on seniors, that they're going to see it in their refunds. And so our expectation is that you're going to have the biggest refund season ever, which is going to be a significant positive stimulus for the economy. But I will add a non-inflationary stimulus because we've got all the supply going up too. We've got $18 trillion in new factory construction and so on. And so I think that it's really, the Trump golden age is going to be tested, the theory of it this year, and I think it's looking pretty good.
That is great. Meanwhile,
now, where was this when I was serving and bartending? No tax on tips? Brother, I would have pocketed so much more during my time in food and bev. But, talking about the stimulus, if what Hassett says here is true, that supply is going up as well, then these refund checks could be great timing. During COVID, trillions of dollars were sent out when we were on a lockdown. So you have the physical constraint of people not being able to go out to malls and shop, people not being able to go out to clubs and spend money on liquor, people going to concerts, all that stuff. There were also logistical issues as well, like shipping bottlenecks. So I know for me, when I hear the word stimulus, it's kind of like a buzzword because I think of inflation. Like when Trump was talking about stimmies, I was like, oh no, it's 2020 all over again. Uh, but again, if what Hassett says is true and the supply side of things is handled, then this stimmy might be a perfect time.
There's a lot of pushback on this investigation into Jay Powell. A lot of debate over Fed independence following the Justice Department's probe of the chairman over his congressional testimony last June. Global central bankers have stepped in to defend Powell. They're warning that central bank independence is a cornerstone of economic stability. President Trump said this week he has no plans to fire Powell. He only wants lower interest rates. But, I mean, Kevin, did Jay Powell do anything wrong to justify an actual criminal investigation while the president wants lower interest rates?
You know, Maria, we at the White House, we respect the independence of the Fed. You know how much you and I have talked about it. It's absolutely essential for the stability of the economy, and we respect the independence of the Justice Department. The problem is, from the point of view of the circumstance, that the Justice Department was asking the Fed to answer some questions, and they couldn't get their answers. Janine Pirro said that she was asking questions all the way back a few months ago, and so they felt the necessity of doing it this way. I find that regrettable. I certainly hope that there's nothing to see here, but all corners of government, the Fed, the White House, everything, we have a responsibility to the American people to be transparent. And I think that if I were Fed chair, that I would insist on transparency. I probably would have answered the questions right away. But the bottom line is, I expect, Jay's a good man. I expect that there's nothing to see here, that the cost overruns are related to things like asbestos, as he says. But I sure wish they had been more transparent.
So I haven't really been keeping up with the Fed and who's potentially in line to take the torch. But what I do know is that it sounds an awful lot like what the crypto industry had to endure with the chair of the SEC, Gary Gensler. When I was super involved in that industry, the SEC would put off answering questions from Congress and industry leaders. All that was asked from them was clarity. Clarity on how to go about operations, so that they can run it legally and in the best interests of people wanting to get into the industry. Ask and you shall receive, unless you're the SEC. And it sounds like this is the same thing that's going on with the Fed. I mean, they're being asked questions and they're just not giving any answers to it. So when people, bash Trump on how he's been treating Jerome Powell, it's like, well, is Jerome Powell actually providing him information? Is he actually wanting to help him in succeeding? Or is he just playing this game, this dick measuring contest? So I don't know how many of you guys were heavily involved in the crypto industry, but this is very similar.
The issue is now that the Democrats are so angry over this investigation that they're going to stop progress on the president's nominees. I mean, the president's trying to, move forward toward naming his next chairman of the Federal Reserve. You're on the short list. It could come this month. A prediction market showing this tight race on Kalshi. You and Kevin Warsh are the leaders of the pack
Shout
here.
outs
And of course, we know that the president gave a second interview to Rick Reeder at BlackRock. So we're all trying to understand, where that process is. But look, at the end of the day, the person has to be confirmed, right? I mean, the Democrats are saying we're not going to move anybody forward, any of the governors, the Federal Reserve. So is this investigation going to hurt the president's agenda and stop its progress?
No, not at all. I mean, the fact is that it's a simple request for information. I'm sure the information will be forthcoming shortly, and then things will move forward. And the people you mentioned, Kevin Warsh, Rick Reeder, they're terrific guys. They'd all be great Fed chairs. The president doesn't have a tough choice, I keep saying, about who the Fed chair is. He has nothing but good choices. And if it were to be me, I've said that I would take the job, and I would take that job with a commitment to Federal Reserve independence and transparency. And I think that that's something that the Fed could have done a lot better in the past.
Has the president spoken to you about what's next for you?
Yeah, we'll leave those conversations between me and the president.
He seems like such a nice
Kevin, we're waiting
nice
on
guy.
The sweeping tariff
Fed chair
from the Supreme
material,
Court, this
no
landmark
clue.
test in the Supreme Court.
I don't know his credentials, but let the best man win. If he has credentials and he think he can pull it off, then go ahead.
The justices signaling a decision on presidential tariff authority in an emergency could come as soon as next week. We've been waiting. The second opinion day came and went, and we didn't get the decision. What are the alternatives should the president see a negative ruling from the Supreme Court and put hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue at risk?
Right. Well, we're highly confident that they're going to side with us, that the legal analysis is on our side. And, we've talked about that on your show before, so I won't have to go into the details of that. But we also have a backup plan that's really solid. We can put a 10% tariff on right away to make up most of the room, and then use things like the 301 authorities, the 232 authorities to backfill the things that we've already achieved with these great deals with the countries. I expect that the Supreme Court is going to be really, really supportive of the president's plan, because look at all of the things that we've created this year. We've got a huge reduction in the deficit. We've got really, really high economic growth, and inflation is way down. If you look at the consumer price index, the last data that we saw showed the core over 3 months at an annual rate at only 1.6%. And so the idea that the tariffs would harm the economy and create inflation has been proven wrong by the data. And I think that the Supreme Court wouldn't want to upend all of that great success either.
Well,
So pretty optimistic. I don't think the Supreme Court would want to do that either. And to be honest, I haven't really kept up with the tariffs as much as I would want to. Uh, but to say that these deals would harm the economy, I mean, it's kind of clear it's bringing more revenue here to us, to America. So how about we let Trump do a sales pitch? He's a businessman at heart, and just see how much he's able to reel in. Like, is it that hard to understand? I don't know. Maybe I'm just
President has used tariffs so
maybe I'm just missing
effectively,
something.
and in terms of ending wars, by the way. But Kevin, you just said immediately we could put a 10% tariff in place. What does that mean? So that wouldn't be under the quote-unquote emergency then?
Yeah, there's a special authority in circumstances like this where there's a 10% tariff that could last for 6 months, which would give you time to sort of iron things out.
And Kevin, do you want to see Congress go for another reconciliation package? It seems the conversation is gaining strength within the Congress, and I know the president has lots of items to perhaps include in a second reconciliation package by year end.
Right. The president is discussing with congressional leaders whether we should do that. I think a lot of us, if you look at like the great ideas to help Americans with their housing issues, believe that a second reconciliation could help us with that. But in the end, I think the majority leader and the speaker are going to have to count the votes and decide whether they can pull it off. But if they can, we'll celebrate here at the White House.
All right, Kevin, great to see you this morning, and we will see you in Davos next week.
Thank
Yes,
you,
we will.
Kevin. All right. So we've reached the supposed deadline, and seems like it wasn't implemented. Now, whether all this is actually implemented later on, we'll see. I know, today it was said that credit card companies were going to comply, and I guess they banded together and didn't. You even saw a bit of a sell-off in the markets for those of you who look at charts and stay up to date. But whether it's implemented later tonight or tomorrow, next week, next month, doesn't matter, as long as their word is followed by some action. Because, Trump wants to talk affordability. Good. Then do something about it. Because empty promises are just going to deter us even more. And these institutions have had their fun, and now we just want to get on with our lives in just a more manageable setting. And, if it gives me some breathing room to buy my first home here soon, then I think this administration did a good job. So, I think we're going to call it for today. Pretty short stream, pretty short video, but I appreciate all you watching. I'll definitely keep up with this just to see if any of this will actually come into fruition. Hopefully it does. But I appreciate you guys for joining in, and I will see you on the next one. All right. Y'all take care.